Good afternoon and welcome to the Elizabeth McGowan Training Institute's Hydration-Dehydration to Drink or Not to Drink program. That is definitely not the question. If this is the first time you're joining us at the Elizabeth McGowan Training Institute or mmlearn.org, we're welcome and so happy to have you. I want to just state right off from the beginning, we have no conflicts of interest when we're presenting any of this information. We have no commercial support for this program. In addition, we have no endorsement of products and no off-label use is related to any content of this activity. I always like to say to folks who are watching us, because I'm sitting in a room and teaching today or standing with no one in the room, but always anxious to ask people to turn off their cell phones and pagers, because even if you're with other people, it can be distracting, so I'll ask you to do that. I'm Maria Wellisch, and I'm a registered nurse, and I'm also a licensed nursing home administrator, and I'm really excited to be able to present this Training Delivered to You program today. What I want to tell you is because I am alone, I like to have you communicate with me, and at the top of your taskbar you see a little bubble, just like you see on your PowerPoint. And if you want to ask a question or make a comment, if you just click on that, you can send us a comment or your questions, and I encourage you to do so throughout the program. And you can also telephone us with questions or comments, or even if you're having technical difficulty, at 264-7000, and that's area code 210-264-7000. And I put in that area code because we have so many people watching us from different places. And today I would like to welcome, and this is really exciting, from Homer, Alaska, at the Adult Day Services there, we have Gay, and let me look at the last name, Pendleton, who's the manager who has set up this program, and we're so delighted that you've joined us, and we're excited to have Alaska on board with us. So our goal this year is 50 states and Alaska. Thank you very much. From other facilities where you're watching, let us know who's there, how many are watching. It helps us make us know that other people are out there and enjoying this with us or not. So let's begin with talking about dehydration. And very simply, I looked at a lot of definitions on dehydration, and some of them were very complicated, but very simply, this is the amount of water that's leaving the body is greater than the amount that's being taken in. That's all you have to understand initially for dehydration. Much more involved for nurses when they have to get into electrolyte and electrolyte imbalances. But basically, you have for dehydration, more water is leaving than is coming into the body. I can't stress enough before we start this program how serious a problem in long-term care facilities, assisted living facilities, and other places this is as a problem for our residents and for the community at large. This is not limited to just long-term care. All of us, from birth to death, are affected by dehydration, but we are especially susceptible when we're in a long-term care. 1/3 of residents in long-term care facilities experience a dehydration episode in a 6-month period. I'm going to say that again. That is so important. 1/3 of residents in long-term care will have an experience of dehydration. Can you imagine? And so when you look at this across the amount of a year, we have to be so attentive to this, and hopefully we'll make an impact with this program today. I want you to understand that we always teach about dehydration in long-term care facilities, assisted living, adult daycare facilities, senior centers, how important fluid rounds are. But this is way more than just pushing it through and putting out fluids. It really is about consumption and why people consume and why they don't and what are the ramifications. So I'm delighted if you have a fluid card and that you make fluid rounds, but I want you to really understand why we're doing this. How serious is this problem? Well, the most serious consequence of dehydration, unfortunately, is death. And dehydration is now and has been for a number of years considered a sentinel event by CMS. And anybody who works in a long-term care facility knows of other sentinel events like impactions. But we don't always think about dehydration until somebody is admitted to the hospital as a sentinel event. But any time this is diagnosed, you need to know and be aware that CMS looks so closely at this. And we're doing this because it's so important to our residents above all. I thought this was real interesting in an article I read that they did 4 major categories for hydration habits for residents in long-term care. And remember, whenever I talk about long-term care, this relates to other folks as well. So we're not limited to just nursing homes. But it's divided up into can drink, can't drink, won't drink, and end of life. And can drink is that people are able to access and consume the fluids, but they may be cognitively impaired. They may never have been somebody who took a lot of hydration, and they don't know the importance. And some of this relates to habits. Can't drink is they're physically incapable of accessing the fluids. So this could be somebody at home who can't get out of bed. This can be one of our residents who can't reach the water pitcher. And this can be somebody who can't safely consume liquids, and there we've been talking about dysphagia. So can drink, can't drink, won't drink. And this is one of the most interesting of ones, and there was a lot of literature on this, about how many people will decide not to drink because of urinary incontinence. And they don't want to have these episodes, or they don't want to have to get up during the night to toilet, so they start restricting fluids very early in the day, and it's something very embarrassing and they don't talk about. And then, of course, there's the end of life or the terminally ill residents or just community dwellers. But I want to talk about that a little bit later, and I have a whole slide on that because I think that's important for us all to consider as well. So when you're thinking about hydration habits, those who can drink, can't drink, won't drink, end of life. So what are the causes of dehydration? And we can talk a lot about this, but I'm not going to do that today because I think many of us are aware of these, but I just want to run through them so that we're sure that we cover them. Number one is that we know that one of the causes for dehydration is just simply age. After the age of 85, we see even a greater increase in dehydration. There is a decreased content of body water as one ages. And I'm not sure people always understand this, but this is because we're replacing muscle mass with fat cells, and that affects how we metabolize and how we handle things in our body. I'm going to be doing a program in June that will be for nurses, and I think at that point we'll get into electrolyte imbalances and what's happening there, but I think it's very important for people to understand just a basic idea of exchanging fat cells for muscle cells. We all know that have worked in long-term care, but many people who have not do not understand that there is a decreased thirst mechanism when people age up. And that actually can be hormonally induced, but I want you to know that the most important thing is, as we get older, our desire to drink, our need to drink, our knowledge that we should be drinking is reduced. The physical or mental inability to consume fluids, and we'll be talking about that when we get into a little bit more about dementias and cognitive and some stroke issues. Depression, alteration in mood, and I guess, again, our cognitive status all affect our dehydration status and causes for dehydration in the elderly. There's some more, and I want to talk to you about renal changes. We all know that as every year goes on, there are some people who never have renal changes, very minimal at most. But for many people aging up, we see major changes in their kidneys and their ability to filtrate and how the kidneys work. Dysphagia, I can't speak about enough. The difficulty in swallowing is another reason for dehydration. And it isn't just that they're having difficulty swallowing. For any one of us that have ever had to use thickened liquids, I would just ask you, have you tried it? If you have not tried thickened liquids and you're working with seniors that have to consume thickened liquids in order to be able to swallow safely, I think you should have to try it to be able to understand. And I really encourage people to take a sip and see what that's like. Poor dietary intake, we'll talk about in a minute, because a lot of people think that if you're eating poorly, that isn't going to affect your fluid. That's not true, and we're going to see that with some vegetables and other food sources in a minute. The lack of available fluid is always something that's important. And I want to talk about here, this is the picture that all of us see in hospital rooms, in assisted living, skilled nursing. We always see these fluid containers. I could get a whole lecture on these just in regards to infection control and handling ice. But the bottom line is, without fresh water and without having it available, and we keep talking about, do you have it at the bedside? Is it within the reach of the resident? If it is not, the person cannot consume. And they may not even think about asking for a drink of water if they don't see something that triggers their thought that they might be in need of more fluids. We're going to talk about